I found my husband at my tasting table with another woman wearing my chef coat. And the worst part was not the coat. It was my name stitched over her heart, Brielle Sutton in navy thread. While her hand rested beside the fall menu I had written, Cole looked up first, calm enough to make the insult feel rehearsed, and Willa Drake lifted her wineglass like she had been expected. Beside her plate sat a mock-up for a supper club I had never approved, with a clean logo that made my stomach cold. The room smelled like roasted pear, brown butter, and the silence people use when bad manners need polish. Cole folded his napkin and said, "Brielle, don't make this emotional. We're trying to handle the transition like adults." While Willa smiled at transition as if my marriage and kitchen were furniture being moved. I looked past my sleeve on her arm to the iPad beside the centerpiece, where Cole's operations account was still open. A green export bar sat near the end, sending my private calendar to a device I did not recognize. I did not ask how long it had been going on, because the answer sat between the wineglass and the menu. My notes were in the margins, including the warning beside the squash course about one bride's nut allergy, a detail no stranger should have had. Willa tapped one nail against the mock-up and said, "You built something lovely, but not everything has to stay yours forever." And Cole let it stand. His silence told me enough, because he had not hidden her in a hotel room. He had seated her inside my work. I closed the iPad before the export finished, and the small click cut through the table harder than shouting would have. Cole's mouth tightened, but I turned to the guests and asked if they wanted cider reduction before dessert. My voice did not shake, not because I felt calm, but because evidence had given my hands something steadier than anger. Under the table, I texted my father one sentence I should have sent years earlier. "Dad, I need the old vendor binders." I drove back to Sutton Table with the taste of brown butter still sitting wrong in my throat. The kitchen should have felt like mine the moment I unlocked the side door, but the first thing I saw was my personal locker hanging open. 2 chef coats were gone. The hook where my spare apron usually hung was empty, and the tasting board had been rewritten in Cole's neat block letters. He had not just brought Willa into my marriage. He had walked her through the room where my name had a smell, a rhythm, and a key. Laurel Briggs stood near the pastry counter with flour on her wrist and fear all over her face. She had worked beside me for 6 years, long enough to know when silence looked like guilt. Cole said it was rebrand prep, she whispered, keeping her voice low even though no one else was there. Willa came in twice last week for content. I thought you knew. I looked at the blank hook again, then at the schedule pinned above the prep sink, where 3 private tastings had been marked in a color I never used. I opened the office laptop and started checking what Cole had touched. Vendor pricing had been downloaded. Client allergy notes had been printed, and a folder of kitchen photos showed Willa standing by my prep table after closing, wearing my apron like it had been handed to her with permission. A man hiding an affair would have kept her out of the back hallway. Cole had brought her inside, taught her where the knives were stored, where the contracts lived, and which clients trusted us enough to tell the truth about their health. Laurel wiped her hands on her apron until the fabric twisted between her fingers. "There's something else," she said, and the shame in her voice made me turn before the words landed. Cole had asked her to confirm an ingredient delivery that never arrived, telling her it was just to keep the insurance paperwork clean. I did not forgive her in that moment, because fear does not erase a signature. I only held out my hand and said, "Send me the original email, not a screenshot." In America, a lie with a timestamp stops being gossip and starts becoming evidence. My father arrived at the back door before sunrise, carrying 3 boxes against his chest like they weighed more than paper. The vendor binders sat inside. Rubber bands cracked. Tabs faded. Every page smelling of flour and dust. Graham Sutton had built this place before it had a website. Before Cole learned how to smile at clients and call himself operations. He set the first binder on the table and said, I kept copies because kitchens still need locked drawers. I wanted to apologize before he opened anything, but my throat tightened around the words. He did not give me a speech about being right, and that made it worse than anger. One by one, he showed me supplier agreements where prices jumped after Cole took over ordering, client emails asking why he used a personal account, and a sanitation complaint that never reached our official inbox. The paper did not accuse me, but every date showed how long I had mistaken quiet damage for marital stress. I sat across from him where my mother's biscuit recipe was still taped inside a cabinet door. I defended him too long. I slipped out before I could dress it up, and Graham only pushed a folded email closer. It showed Cole forwarding a private client list to himself with the subject changed to menu research. 2 ordinary words that felt filthy. Behind that email was another message from Willa asking whether the fall tasting notes included guest allergies, and my stomach turned cold. Reese Calder arrived with a legal pad, cold coffee in her hand, and the calm of someone paid to keep grief from becoming a mistake. She told me to preserve every original email, lock Cole's access for data protection, notify vendors in writing, review employee agreements, and say nothing online that sounded personal. Graham rubbed both palms over the binder covers and murmured, "A kitchen can survive burnt butter." Brielle. A name burns when someone inside opens the back door. I looked at the binders, the emails, the complaint, with no proper trail, and decided Cole would not hear my anger at dinner. He would hear doors closing. Cole came to Sutton Table that morning, wearing the pale blue shirt he saved for clients who tipped well. He carried a coffee in one hand and his phone in the other, smiling at the staff like nothing in the building had shifted overnight. I watched from the office doorway as he tapped his keycard against the kitchen reader. The light stayed red, and the denied beep sounded softer than justice should have sounded. He tried again, then opened the booking app, and the smile started leaving his face in pieces. Vendor portal, calendar, client notes, inventory sheet. Every door he used to move through my business now asked for credentials he no longer had. His phone began buzzing, one supplier after another asking why his personal email was no longer approved for Sutton Table orders. Cole looked across the prep room at me and forced a laugh. "Brielle, whatever you think you're doing, this is not how a wife handles business." I sent the staff one short note before anyone could turn fear into gossip. All operational changes would go through me and Reese Calder while we reviewed data access, vendor authorization, and client privacy. No accusations. No speech. No mention of Wayla. Just plain language people believe because it does not beg to be believed. Cole walked toward the back door anyway, and Graham stepped in front of it beside Laurel and the day guard we had hired before sunrise. "You are not cleared for this kitchen today," my father said, and Cole's face hardened like a man hearing his borrowed key stop working. By noon, Willa called from a blocked number with honey in her voice and threat underneath it. "Portland talks. Brielle. People don't like difficult women in hospitality," she said, as if manners could turn stolen access into a misunderstanding. I looked at the screenshot of her wearing my chef coat beside my prep table, and her warning came with its own receipt. That afternoon, every client received the same official email. Sutton Table had not changed ownership, had authorized no supper club to use its menus, photos, vendor relationships, or private guest information. The invitation came from a bride I had fed through 2 panic attacks and 1 impossible mother-in-law. She forwarded it with no comment, just the address of a rented loft in the Pearl District and Willa's soft launch title printed over a photo of my own prep table. Cole and Willa had called it a private supper club, but the guest list told the truth faster than the logo did. 3 former Sutton Table clients, 2 food bloggers, and 1 local sponsor had been invited to taste a future built from my notes. I went because silence would have let them serve my work as if it had no hands behind it. Reese Calder walked beside me with one sealed envelope, her expression calm enough to keep mine from hardening too early. The room was all brick walls, white candles, and women in expensive coats pretending they did not recognize the tension. On the welcome table, Willa's sponsor card sat beside a menu that opened with roasted squash, cider cream, and the same private allergy warning I had written for a bride who trusted me. Willa stood near the center of the room, glowing in a cream dress, while Cole hovered close enough to look like a partner and far enough to look innocent. "This dinner is a love letter to women who build from nothing," she told the guests, and my stomach went still because the first course had been lifted from a tasting note that named another woman's medical restriction. I placed Reese's envelope on the check-in table and kept my voice even. That line would land better if your opening dish didn't come from a private client file. No one gasped, and that made it worse for them. The sponsor reached for the menu, then looked at Reese's letter, the metadata on the kitchen photos, and the health department confirmation showing no record of the rumor Willa had been feeding around town. A former client stared at the allergy note and asked why her private information was in Willa's draft. One blogger lowered her phone without being asked. Cole caught my arm in the hallway and hissed that I was ruining his future, but I pulled free and answered, "No, Cole. I'm taking my kitchen out of it." Cole's family came the next afternoon with phones raised and sympathy already written for them. Marlene Renner stood outside Sutton Table in a wool coat, too nice for the grief she was selling, holding a cardboard sign that claimed I had destroyed a working family. Two of Cole's adult cousins stood behind her, filming the front window while lunch guests slowed on the sidewalk. I watched from inside as Marlene lifted her voice and called me cold, rich, and punishing a man who had helped build my business. I did not call the police, because a flashing cruiser would have given her the picture she wanted. I opened the front door, invited them into the waiting area, and placed water on the low table while Reese listened through my phone. Marlene sat down like she had won something and pressed her live stream closer to her face. "My son gave years to this place," she said, loud enough for customers to hear, "and she threw him away because he found someone who respected him." I kept my hands flat on the counter and answered only what could be proven. Anyone who had worked legal shifts would be paid. Anyone not involved in taking client data would receive a clean employment letter, and anyone repeating false food safety claims or using Sutton Table images to raise money for Cole would hear from counsel. Marlene's mouth tightened because the word counsel made the room smaller than her outrage. "You think paperwork makes you decent," she snapped, and I looked at the phones pointed at me, the customers pretending not to listen, and the staff frozen by the espresso machine. The truth did not need volume when half the room was already recording. Then Laurel stepped out from the pastry station with one printed email in her hand. Her voice shook, but she did not lower it when she explained that Cole had used her name to confirm an ingredient delivery that never came. Marlene reached for the paper, then stopped when she saw Cole's personal email address at the top and Laurel's forwarded original underneath. The cousins lowered their phones first, because a family story sounds different when it starts looking like evidence. Marlene left without another speech, and the sidewalk outside Sutton Table became quiet again. After the supper club collapsed, Cole started sounding like a man locked outside his own story. Clients stopped returning his calls. The sponsor pulled its name from Willa's launch page, and Willa posted one polished paragraph about being misled by unnamed parties. Reese sent me the screenshot before I finished my coffee. The draft podcast transcript already showed Willa asking for my tasting notes by name, so her innocence arrived with its own receipt. That night, the backdoor alert came through while I was still at Sutton Table. Reese had made me change the cameras, update the alarm contact, and leave written instructions that any after-hours entry had to be logged. Not debated. Cole knew the old hallway, the old cabinet, and the drawer where we kept archived menus, client photos, vendor sheets, and backup drives. A borrowed key only works until the owner starts paying attention. The guard found him in the office, with a canvas tote open beside his shoes. One hand was inside the cabinet, and the hard drive he still thought could buy him leverage was already in the bag. When I arrived, Cole did not look dangerous, only cornered and furious in a kitchen that no longer softened around him. "You took everything from me," he snapped, and the stolen drive made the sentence sound smaller. I stood near the prep sink where Willa had once posed in my apron, and Cole had nowhere left to put his charm. "You could have left clean after the last coffee," I said as the guard wrote down the time, the door used, and the item found in his tote. "You came back for what was never yours." The police did not need my pain, only the trespass report, revoked access record, camera footage, and the drive. By morning, Willa tried to detach from him with another careful post, claiming she never knew where the materials came from. Reese answered through counsel with the message where Willa asked whether the guest allergy notes were included. Her sponsor page was gone. Her podcast ad had been pulled, and Cole faced an investigation he could not smile through. Sutton Table did not return to what it had been, because I no longer wanted a business built around keys I had handed out too easily. Reese helped me rewrite access rules, client privacy language, and vendor approvals, and each change felt less like punishment than breathing room. Laurel stayed after one hard conversation, not because fear excused her silence, but because her original email helped stop a larger lie. Graham came in 3 mornings a week to bake biscuits before service, finally allowed to be my father instead of my shield. Cole disappeared from the rooms where people used to soften when he smiled. Vendors stopped accepting his personal account. Clients did not return his calls, and the investigation followed documents instead of his story. Marlene's live streams ended after Reese's letter made clear that false food safety claims had consequences. Willa's sponsor page stayed down. Her podcast ad never came back, and people who praised her taste stopped inviting her to tables she had not earned. The first dinner I hosted after everything was small, private, and painfully simple. No cameras, no logo reveal, no speech about survival, just white napkins, warm bread, squash soup from my mother's recipe, and people who looked me in the eye when they thanked me. Graham tasted the soup and smiled into his spoon. "Your mother would have asked for more salt," he murmured, and for the first time in months, her name did not break something open. When the last guest left, I washed the final bowl myself and listened to the kitchen settle around me. The new lock clicked cleanly under my hand, and the sound did not feel lonely. It felt like ownership, like peace with a spine, like a door I could open when I chose. I walked home under Portland rain, knowing I had not rebuilt the old table. I had set one for myself. If this story felt close to something you lived through, remember this: peace can be rebuilt without begging anyone to understand your pain. Subscribe, share your thoughts below, and tell me which moment made you feel Brielle came home to herself.